Hey, welcome back. Tonight's story is about 38 minutes long, so whether you're getting ready to fall asleep or just need something playing in the background while you relax or do something else, this is for you. There are no ads in this video, so nothing will interrupt you while you're listening. If you enjoy these kinds of stories and want more to wind down to, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps support the channel. Alright, get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. I wish I could just cut straight to the chase, but I feel like I should at the very least make an attempt to include some sort of context, otherwise what's the point? I'll try my best to keep it brief. During my college years, our core group of friends made it an annual tradition to go out camping for a few days at a time. Not very original, I know, but it was mostly just an excuse to hang out away from everyone and everything else. We weren't nature enthusiasts or anything of the sort, but it's something we didn't mind doing as a group. The roster wasn't always the same every single year. Exes would come and go, exams or personal matters would keep some of us from joining, and sometimes trivial arguments also resulted in a few faces being a no-show. And yet, somehow, a handful of us always managed to pull through. Brenda, Michael, and Lillian, who've been together for as long as I can remember, Dennis, Margot, and myself. It definitely became harder to schedule things once we all graduated, but we made it work. The only thing that managed to mess up our annual camping streak was the pandemic from a few years ago, and after that, it sort of became easier for people to come up with excuses for not being able to make it. We still chatted semi-regularly and hung out from time to time, but that was it. But this year it was different. Either the stars aligned themselves, or maybe we'd all gotten to a point in our adult lives where we were starting to feel some serious nostalgia for simpler times that aren't that far back into the past, even though there are days where it definitely feels like it. So the 6 of us marked down the dates on our calendars and we made it happen. 2 days, 2 nights seemed simple enough, just as it used to be. We never really pre-planned any special activities unless there were some specific points of interest near the area worth checking out or whatever, but one thing we always did was tell scary stories around the campfire on the first night, sometimes during the second night as well, if some of us were feeling particularly inspired. Whether alcohol played a part in it or not, I'll leave that to your imagination. To be honest, I don't think any of us ever really managed to truly scare anyone with our stories. Some of us, myself included, would try really hard, but more often than not, what we thought was scary turned out to be just an uneven mix of funny, illogical, and campy elements poorly strewn together. Light on goosebumps, but great for laughs. Which wasn't all that bad. This year it was different, and as you might have guessed from the title of this post, I'm currently typing all this out due to what happened on that first night. But before I get to it, there's one more thing I need to mention. As far as I, Brenda, Michael, Lillian, and Margot were concerned, this trip had been planned with only 6 people in mind. But when Dennis finally rolled up to our meeting spot, late as usual, we were all taken aback by the fact that he had brought an extra person with him, someone he had never mentioned in passing to anyone, and who, by the looks of it, was apparently tagging along for the entirety of our get-together out in the woods. Her name was Liz. Now, if this had happened during our college years, I can imagine how this could have been a lot more awkward, having a random person intruding in our group and potentially ruining the solid, pre-established dynamic between us. But we're not kids anymore, and more importantly, we simply aren't as up-to-date as we used to be when it comes to each other's personal lives. Not that it's any excuse to not let the rest of us know that, oh, by the way, I'm bringing someone you've never met before, please be cool. But I think the rest of the group quickly got over it because they seldom get the opportunity to meet new people, and seeing as this is Dennis we're talking about, I think the gang just instinctively made the decision to try and make Liz feel as welcome and included as possible. Maybe I would have felt the same if it weren't for one thing. I had talked to Dennis on the phone the night before about the trip and some other pointless stuff that's not even worth bringing up, and not only did he never hint at this Liz person or anyone else coming along, but he also sounded perfectly normal. But the Dennis we met on that day seemed a little cagey and distraught to me. Maybe he was embarrassed by the whole ordeal to a point where he could hardly look me or anyone else in the eyes. Maybe his girlfriend, if that's what she was, had forced him to invite her against his will or something. Something about it felt weird to me, but I kept it to myself, figuring it would be in everyone's best interest, especially Dennis's, to avoid asking uncomfortable questions and stirring unnecessary drama, which is the one thing we always tried to leave out of these trips. We made some small talk, a quick inventory check to make sure we weren't missing any essentials, and then proceeded to walk on foot for a couple of hours or so before reaching a decent enough spot where we set up our tents right before nightfall. Here's what happened next. After getting a decent fire going and pouring ourselves a few drinks, we figured the time had come to sit down and once again take turns sharing some creepy stories just like we used to. I don't think everyone was particularly enthused by the idea. Maybe they felt like they had grown out of it. Still, you could tell everyone made an effort, to varying degrees, to humor one of the very few traditions that our group somehow managed to keep alive after all these years. Even if the stories turned out to be awful, maybe they could still work as an icebreaker of sorts to help Liz better acclimate herself to the group. Margot, who sat on my left, went first. She recounted a mildly unsettling incident that happened to a friend of hers who was the victim of a stalker for a couple of months after their initial interactions through dating apps fell through. Last she heard, an arrest had been made, but as a story, it didn't really bring anything new to the table, just some guy being a creep. The usual. Then came Brenda's turn, who was sitting to the left of Margot. She pretty much offered a recap of a film she thought was obscure enough for the rest of us to not pick up on. Something that prompted Michael, the hardcore horror enthusiast of the group, to lightly grill her over once she was done. I remembered a time when calling her out in a similar fashion would have made her pack her things on the spot and leave, and for a second I worried that Michael's harmless jab might have been sufficient to ruin the mood, if not the entire weekend. To my surprise, Brenda chuckled, raised her glass of gin and tonic in the air, and said, "All right, you got me," before downing her drink, pretending like that was an actual punishment for her deception. "Why don't you go next then? Let's see what you got, nerd," she playfully said. Michael, who sat to my right, grinned as he straightened himself and rolled up his sleeves, as he was the type of person to never waste an opportunity to terrorize his friends, especially when he had their full attention and their consent to do so. Before he could proceed with whatever demented story he had cooked up just for the occasion, Dennis chimed in. "Actually, would you mind if she goes first?" he asked, without either looking at Michael or motioning for someone in particular, although we naturally inferred he meant Liz. "She's got something she needs to share with everyone." Michael grimaced before quickly shooting back an "okay, sure," but even though I could tell he was slightly bummed for having the spotlight snatched away from him, the way Dennis had worded his request definitely got Michael and everyone else's attention. Before I continue, and just to help you visualize the setting, this is how we were all seated in relation to each other, clockwise and starting from the top. You had Liz, who sat right across from me, Dennis to her left, then Lillian, Michael, myself, Margot, and finally Brenda. "Let's hear this story then," Michael said, almost in a challenging tone, which prompted Lillian to tug at his shirt and shoot him a look. Liz shook her head as soon as she heard his words, her eyes fixated on the crackling fire pit between myself and her. "It's not a story. It's a dream I had. Or nightmare, rather, I guess. Hope that's all right." Michael looked at me and rolled his eyes, upset that she could use the dream excuse to make up as many horrifying details as she wanted, just to spice up her own tale. Sensing his reaction, Lillian elbowed him gently as a reminder to not be a dick. Everyone else gave her the okay in a heartbeat, but you could tell that the mood had shifted a little, no doubt in response to Liz's serious demeanor, as well as the prospect that she could be on the verge of unloading some very personal things onto a group of strangers instead of sharing a simple, silly, scary story. She took a deep breath and began. There's this scream, but it's a scream unlike any I've ever heard in my life. I know deep down that it's coming from someone somewhere nearby, but there's something just really off and absolutely terrifying about it. She crossed her arms and squeezed them for comfort, her eyes still glued to the fire, as if looking for the right words within its flames to help her illustrate her nightmare. I've never heard anything like it in real life or in any movies or games or whatever. It's not really calling for help, it's just a visceral cry of pure horror and pain, and the reason it terrifies me to my core is because my mind can't even begin to imagine what could be causing this indescribable amount of agony. And the sound. She raised her hands and placed them on her face, briefly covering most of her features except her eyes. It's so loud that it rattles my bones, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps going, and I'm just frozen in place, unsure of what to do. I know this person needs help, but I can't find the courage to go look for them because I'm afraid of what I'll find. Afraid I'll see a scene so horrible my own brain won't be able to rationalize. I'm so afraid and so sick to my stomach, more than I've ever been in my entire life, of finding out what's causing that scream. But the more it goes on, she began to shake her head, very slightly. The more it goes on, the more I start to wonder how it can possibly still be going. I know that it's a dream, but something about it feels real, and it doesn't make sense to me that this person hasn't died yet, or at the very least passed out or destroyed their vocal cords from such a prolonged pained cry caused by whatever is being done to them. And I think that's when it hits me. She paused for a few seconds, her lips quivering. Maybe it's not a person at all. Maybe something's trying to lure me in by mimicking the exaggerated sounds of someone in need. Or maybe it really is a person whose impossible pain is being inflicted at the hands of someone or something. She took a deep breath and slowly let out a big sigh, and for a moment it seemed as if she was actually getting teary-eyed. I know she said this was a dream, but I didn't think anyone present was actually buying her story, though it was hard to ignore her commitment to the bit and how palpable her emotions felt. She continued, "So I decide to go look for the source of this scream. I can't really explain why, but it's just something I know I have to do, something I'm supposed to do. Maybe I've finally fallen for its spell and I'm being led to my demise, or maybe something in me decided that at the very least I should check to see if someone needed my help, or maybe morbid curiosity simply won over. Maybe a combination of those options seems more likely, since I'm really not that good of a person." The corner of her mouth slightly twisted itself into a smirk, but I don't think anyone else caught it, as she quickly pressed on. "So I start walking through the woods. It's nighttime and I can barely see anything, to a point where I think to myself that I won't actually be able to get anywhere. It's a comforting thought, as much as I hate to admit it, because it would mean that I wouldn't have to face whatever's out there all on my own. And then I realize that I don't really need to see, not when that goddamn scream seems to be pulling me towards it, growing ever louder whenever I happen to take one more step toward its direction. Next thing I know, I've arrived at a clearing, and there's a small black cabin in front of me. The door is wide open, or rather, broken off its hinges, as if whatever's inside has been waiting for me all this time, and even though it's very dark out, I can tell that not a single window has any glass panes in it. Whether they were smashed before my arrival or never there to begin with, I don't know, but I don't like it. Why? Lillian asked in a low, hushed tone, a clear indicator that she was genuinely terrified by what she was hearing, as if the way she was latching onto Michael wasn't enough of a giveaway. Liz didn't seem bothered by what was, surprisingly, the first interjection someone had made since she'd started recounting her nightmare. In fact, she was so unbothered and unsurprised that her vacant stare didn't even meet Lillian's, not even for a brief second just to acknowledge her, because the door is wide open and the windows aren't shut. Whatever is happening inside, whoever is responsible wants me to know that they have all the power, all of the control, and that there's no escape from what looks to be, at first glance, just an unguarded cabin with no one in it. I know that I could be walking into a trap. I know that I won't be able to leave from the moment I step inside, and I know that I could be moments away from seeing or experiencing pain and suffering on a level that shouldn't be possible. But I've come this far. And the other thing is that the scream has become so impossibly and unbearably loud the closer I got to the cabin that I just want it to stop, no matter what it takes, even if it means I have to walk in and take its place. A part of me is very much against the idea of proceeding, but my body continues to move all on its own because it too knows that all of this has to stop, and that it won't stop until I see this thing to the end, whatever this is. So I walk in, and something happens the moment my foot crosses the entrance's threshold. She paused. That ungodly, piercing sound just disappears, like that. She snapped her fingers, like something just erased it from existence, gone without a trace, not even leaving a single echo behind. I should feel relieved, but the deafening silence that replaced it might honestly be even worse. It's so heavy and so absolute that I thought my own hearing might have been taken away as well, either by the scream or by whatever snuffed it out. It's bad either way, because deep in my gut I know that whatever's inside the house knows that I'm here, and canceling out all other sounds is its sick way of rolling out the red carpet just for me. I know I should just leave, and I probably could if I wanted to. When I turn around, the door's still there, open, letting a very faint breeze in. I even take a step towards it, and realize no unseen force is keeping me in place. I could just go and disappear into the night. So why don't you? Margot asked. Liz shrugged. Maybe the screams would return, although I don't think they would. Then why? Margot insisted, visibly upset that someone who wasn't even her friend would put herself in danger in a scenario that wasn't even real to begin with. Because I need to know what brought me to this place and for what purpose. I need to know what happened here, don't you? No one answered. I scanned everyone's faces as best as I could. The girls were evidently terrified, while Michael was so absorbed and leaning forward that it's a miracle he hadn't fallen face first into the fire pit just yet. Dennis, on the other hand, barely seemed like he was there or paying any attention. The fact of the matter is, most of us were invested in her story by this point, so it's only natural that we wanted to see it through. Hell, I would have been the first to laugh my ass off if all of it had been leading up to a terrible joke, or if she hit us with a "to be continued" before revealing to us that she's a screenwriter who's still fleshing out the story. If only. Okay, so you walked in and... Michael said, eager for Liz to continue and completely oblivious to how unsettled his own girlfriend was by his side. Liz didn't seem to care either. I walk in and I know deep down that nothing can prepare me for whatever's waiting for me inside. I keep on walking until I reach the entrance to the only room that seems to have a faint source of light coming from it. There aren't any doors in this house, but I don't bother peering into any of the other pitch-black rooms because I know there's nothing there. The room with the light is the one where I'm awaited. I keep my eyes glued to the floor, wanting to delay facing the inevitable for as long as possible. I can't make out anything other than my feet and the old wet floorboard, but I can feel it in the air, that something's in there with me, maybe just out of my field of vision, waiting for me to look up and finally acknowledge it. She paused, and no one dared to make a sound. And then I looked, and before I could even begin to process what I was seeing, before I could let out a scream or react in any way, I felt my mind shatter and crumble almost immediately from whatever it was that I saw and smelled in that room. I can't really describe the scene to you, only my primal sense of revulsion, which scrubbed off those impossibly abominable, unspeakable images from the very fabric of my being, but some traces remain. She lowered her head, looking down at her lap. If I try real hard, I can see the room and feel on some level that I know what's in there and that I know what happened, but I can't bring myself to put it into actual words. The mere thought of attempting to do so feels like the most depraved thing a normal person could ever think of doing, and it sickens me. She gently rubbed her face, but I couldn't tell whether she was actually wiping some tears. I thought she was done, but she kept going. But there's one thing I remember, one detail I can still see even now clear as day. Everyone braced for the impact of what should be the final reveal, or twist, or whatever. Liz proceeded, only this time with a stare that seemed strangely vacant and utterly lost in the horror she was recalling. There's a man in the room. I can see his face, and his abhorrent expression is all I need to know that he's the one responsible for whatever horrors took place inside the cabin. He's the one who caused all that impossible screaming. He's the one who made me come all the way out here for some sinister reason, and I know who he is. I recognize him. She paused again, having become slightly more agitated over the course of this last stretch of her story. I don't know if I felt sorry for her and wanted for her to just be done with it, for her own sake, or if I'd grown impatient with how she seemed to just be edging us. Either way, I blurted out, "Who is it?" And she immediately shot me a piercing look. I'm not sure if this was the first time she actually looked at someone directly from the moment she began telling us her story, but something about the unrelenting intensity in her unwavering, unexpected stare made me deeply uneasy. A small gust of wind blew in, putting the dying fire out of its misery. "It's you," she said, with a voice that trembled, not with fear, but with a profound, venomous ire. My stomach dropped, and I felt my entire body suddenly become coated in cold sweat. "It's you," she repeated, with an increased level of repulsion that only I, the person on the receiving end of such vile and imaginary accusations, could perceive. One by one, everyone else slowly turned their heads towards me. For a moment, I genuinely thought that surely one of them was bound to break character sooner or later, and burst out laughing about how they had succeeded in both creeping me out and pranking me. But no one said a word, and I couldn't even think of anything to say as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. We just sat there in silence. Margot eventually got up and said she was going to sleep, which prompted everyone else but Liz to do the same. When Brenda asked Liz if she was okay, she said that she was, but that she'd stay put for a little longer before going into her own tent. They all just left the two of us there without addressing me directly or commenting on Liz's dream and my own involvement in it, according to her. Even without the fire between us as a light source, I could tell that her gaze was still fixed on me. The more I tried to make sense of this situation, the angrier I got, but I tried to not let it show. Why would they go through all of this trouble to make me feel like shit, and even recruit the help of someone none of us really know just to make me feel even more uncomfortable? I understand wanting to pull a prank, but this was beyond anything anyone from our group ever thought of pulling. This was on a whole other level, and I couldn't even think of what I could have possibly done to anyone that could begin to justify this twisted setup. But the absolute worst part is no one being bothered to let me in on the joke, even after its punchline, and being perfectly content with leaving me in the dark, figuratively and literally, even if it meant completely destroying my disposition for the rest of the weekend. Why would they do this to me, and how could every single person in our group go along with it, and with such a straight face? I was angry, yes, but also deeply hurt by the insensitivity and senselessness of it all. But I didn't say a single word. If that's what they wanted, I wouldn't be giving them the satisfaction so easily. I briefly stared back at Liz, who still sat on her end of the makeshift log benches we hastily put together, looking right back at me. She had nothing else to say, and neither did I, so I got up and went back to my own tent without saying a word. For all I know, she sat there for the entire night. I'm not sure if I actually got any sleep, because by the time I came to, I was still as furious as I was the night before. It was almost 10 a.m. when I checked my phone. We hadn't agreed on a set hour to wake up or anything. Usually we just allowed ourselves to sleep in for as long as we wanted. Then we'd cook breakfast or lunch, depending on the time of day, and eat the meal before carrying on with our loose schedule. I couldn't hear any kind of noise outside, which got me thinking I was probably the first person to wake up. I figured I might as well go for a morning walk in an attempt to clear my thoughts, knowing it probably wouldn't be of much help. Maybe, upon my return, they'd finally come clean about the whole ordeal, and even though a part of me would undoubtedly still resent them all for it, at least I wouldn't have to spend the rest of the day being pissed about it. When I unzipped my tent to step outside, my heart nearly stopped with the scene I was met with, and for the second day in a row, I was at a loss for words. Not only was everyone else already up and about, they were all just standing there with their gear and bags fully packed and ready to go. I don't know what bothered me the most, the fact that they all somehow got up, got dressed, and packed their things without me taking notice, or that they were all just standing there, silently staring me down, and sort of visibly annoyed, as if they'd all been waiting for ages for me to do the same. With the exception of Liz, who stood the furthest away from my tent, everyone else was facing my direction. "Yeah?" I asked, with my head poking outside of my tent. "We're going somewhere," Michael said. "Yeah?" I added, frustrated, but also hoping to elicit a similar response from any one of them. "Yes," Lillian replied. "We're just waiting on you." "Cool," I said. "You can wait." "You..." I zipped up my tent and tried to gather my thoughts before actually starting to pack my things. They weren't chatting outside or making small talk of any kind from what I could hear, but I did get the feeling that they were circling me as if wanting to ensure that I wouldn't be making a sneaky exit of some sort without them noticing. Maybe it was just my imagination, but if they were that hell-bent on keeping up the charade, so would I. It took me a few good minutes to get all my stuff together, but I didn't exactly rush it either. No one bothered to ask if I needed or wanted any help, which made everything all the more awkward, as I was the only one making any kind of noise, while they just waited in silence without doing or saying anything. But I welcomed that awkwardness and did what I could to prolong it, because I wanted to make them feel as uncomfortable as I was. They didn't seem fazed, but two can play at that game, and I'm not one to quit. Once I strapped my backpack on, I slapped the side of my legs to let them know I was ready to go. Liz briefly looked in my direction, without actually meeting my eyes this time, and then she started walking. One by one, the others turned away from me and began following her steps without a word. They were probably counting on me inquiring about where we were headed or something, so I didn't. I just followed along as the last person of the group, all the way at the back. It was around 10:40 a.m. when we got moving, and by noon we were still walking. Whenever I stopped to drink some water or tie my shoelaces, they would also stop seemingly in unison, regardless of the distance between myself and the rest of them. After a further 30 minutes of walking, I removed my backpack and sat down on a nearby overgrown tree stump, not giving a rat's ass as to whether everyone else would just keep on walking without me. Much to my dismay, they immediately halted their pace and turned towards me, some facing me completely, others side-eyeing me, all but Liz, who kept her back towards. I let out a small scoff, inaudible to anyone else but me, and I chuckled. I rubbed my hands together, stretched my legs, then reached into my bag for some snacks, which I ate without a single care in the world. I was delighted not by their taste, but by how much my actions were likely pissing them off to some extent. I gave no signs that I'd be getting up on my feet any time soon to proceed with the hike. and after 10 minutes or so of me slowly stuffing my face, I was almost convinced that they'd just waited out in silence, but I was wrong. Brenda, the one closest to me, spoke up. "You can do that later," she said. I didn't look at her. Instead, I slowly, loudly crumpled in my hand the foil packaging of the snack bars I'd just eaten, and after putting them away somewhere in my backpack so as to not litter the area, I brought my right hand up and cupped my ear towards her, pretending I didn't hear what she said. A long pause followed. "I said you can do that later." "Where? When?" I asked. No answer from her or anyone. I shrugged and pulled out another protein bar, and for the first time since we left our camp, I sensed actual hostility coming from the people I thought were my friends. Before I could tear up the package, I noticed that Dennis had started walking back towards me, and I didn't realize until after the fact that my hand instinctively went for the pocket knife I kept in one of my front pockets. I was already on my feet by the time he reached me. "We have to go," he said. "Go. Fucking." "Where?" I shot back, loudly enunciating each word right in his face. Brenda, Margot, Michael, and Lillian took a noticeable step towards me. I'd done my due diligence a few days prior to the trip and looked up what sort of hiking trails and other points of interest might exist in the area, because I knew no one ever bothered to really look at those things in depth. I always did my homework more out of curiosity than anything else, because I figured it would be cool to actually have places to visit, and to be the one that actually found them for the rest of us. But whatever path Liz had us walking on wasn't one I was familiar with. Even after looking at the handful of screenshots I'd saved on my phone, I still couldn't tell where we could possibly be headed. This was all no doubt part of their big prank, whatever it entailed, but I was done playing along. Whatever this was, it wasn't worth the time or the effort or the incessant gnawing sensation I had in the pit of my stomach. They took another step. "We're almost there," Dennis whispered as his warm morning breath filled up my nostrils. "You will see." I used my tongue to dislodge some bits and pieces of the protein bar still stuck to my teeth right before spitting the load right over Dennis's shoulder, barely missing his face. He didn't flinch or blink. "Nah," I said. I looked into his eyes and could swear that he was just about to take a swing at me, but before I could take any measures to protect myself, a sudden loud noise completely derailed my train of thought. At first I thought one of them had tripped over and hurt themselves as they were making their way towards me, but one quick look at the rest of the group and I could tell they weren't the ones making that sound. That awful, distant sound of someone screaming as if their guts were slowly being pulled out while the soles of their feet were set ablaze. Liz's story and all of its eerie details immediately flooded my mind. What the fuck? I don't know how they pulled it off, or how many more people they got to tag along, but I couldn't stand how it was making me feel. I wanted to shout at them to just turn it off, but that god-awful scream sounded so real, so desperate, and so goddamn loud that I could barely form a coherent thought. Not one of them seemed bothered or distressed by it, and I could just tell from the way my insides were doing backflips and the way my own brain was firing off all sorts of signals that what I was hearing couldn't possibly be a recording of some sort. It was real. "Someone needs our help. We have to go," Margot said. I looked at her, someone I thought I knew whom I'd known for a number of years, but I didn't recognize her or any of them. Not really, not completely, not anymore. I then looked at Liz, who remained distant enough from where I stood that I couldn't quite make out her features. I'm not entirely sure of what happened next, but I remember bolting in the opposite direction. I didn't even think of grabbing my backpack. I just ran out of there as fast as I could. I must have looked back a single time as soon as I took off, and I noticed that, for some strange reason, not one of them had begun pursuing me. They all just stood exactly where I'd left them. But the same thing couldn't be said for the scream, which loudly threatened to follow me to the ends of the earth. My body was on autopilot while my brain kept thinking of the worst possible shit that could happen to me in the middle of nowhere if for some reason I couldn't find my way back. I ran until my legs almost gave out, and by that point I was nearly out of the woods. The sky was clear, my phone was still working, and I was finally starting to recognize some local landmarks, and while my ears were still loudly buzzing, the scream itself had dissipated at some point without me noticing. Despite being mentally scarred, I was physically unharmed. I reached the parking lot where we had left our cars, and after briefly inspecting everyone else's rides from the outside, especially the one that belonged to Dennis, which Liz also rode in, and realizing they wouldn't be providing me with any answers, I got in my car and drove home. I held my phone in my hand during the entire drive, hoping for a text message or a call from any of them that would let me know that they really did get me, but none ever came, not a single one. I have, however, gotten calls and texts from friends and relatives. They haven't heard from them, and their respective places of employment are also inquiring about their unplanned and prolonged absence. I wanted to believe that they were all in on it as well for whatever reason, but I know that can't possibly be true. I've had to deal with a number of calls from some very concerned parents, some of which I've actually known for a number of years and met in person a few times, and there's a kind of genuine parental concern that you just can't fake. I didn't really know what to say or how to explain what had happened, so I either said something had come up and I had to leave early, or that they had decided to prolong their trip in a way that didn't really suit me. I don't think anything I said constitutes a lie, but I know how bad this looks, and I know it's only a matter of time until law enforcement gets involved. I've barely slept since I got back, and to say that I'm scared shitless of what might happen next to me would be an understatement. I'm sorry if this all sounds insensitive, but I know I did nothing wrong. I've reread everything I wrote here a couple of times, and I know for a fact that's how everything went down. I wish that whatever happened during that night didn't happen, but it did, and right now I can't afford to be worrying about anyone else but me. 6 people are gone, or at the very least, they have yet to show any signs of life. Their phones are still on from what I've been told, but no one is picking up any of the calls. When asked if I'd tried contacting them myself, I lied and said that I had, when in reality that's the last thing I want to do, because something tells me that they would pick up my calls. The exchange I had with Dennis's mother was by far the most unnerving, because when I told her about his friend Liz that he had brought along with him, she said this was the first time she was hearing that name. Furthermore, his mother actually visited him the day before. She baked some goods for him to bring for everyone, and spent the night at his place before seeing him off the next morning when he came to meet us. And never, at any point, was there a young woman riding in his car, or a mention that he'd be picking someone else along the way. I've known Dennis and his mother for a long time, and I know that they've always been pretty open with each other about most things, especially after his father passed unexpectedly from a very aggressive illness a few years ago. So who was this Liz? Where did Dennis pick her up, and why? What did she want, or what did she hope to achieve, and why was I her target? I don't have the answers to those questions at this time, but my mind keeps drifting back to that weird story she told us, and for the worst possible reason too. You see, I doze off every now and then, never enough to a point where I feel like I've actually rested for a bit, but long enough for me to find myself in some dark woods, all alone, while a distant shrill rolls in with the wind and becomes clearer and louder the longer it takes for me to wake up. A black cabin with no doors on its hinges and no glass panes on its windows is the last thing I always see before I wake up. I'm terrified of what else I might hear in that dream. Terrified of the things I might see that I cannot comprehend. I lie down on my bed and think back to the last thing Dennis said to me, "You will see," and I find myself swept away by a wave of pure, abject horror as I come to fully realize the inescapable nature of his words. It wasn't a statement, but a promise.